Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is that you are joining us. My name is Nick, and we want to welcome you to the online edition of The Gathering. The Gathering is a sort of generic name that we gave to this group nearing on 2 years ago now. This little project here has been a combination of two churches, actually. Zion Lutheran Church, which is an ELCA Lutheran church, and Pathways Church, which is a non-denominational independent church. But the truth of the matter is, this project that we started together here, most of our people who are a part of this group these days don't have an association with either of these two churches. And so we're sort of in the process of becoming one. And it's sort of a unique partnership where we have learned a lot about one another's traditions. Zion Lutheran Church was much more formal and liturgical. Pathways was really informal and non-liturgical. And we've had a lot of different ways of doing things, but we came together and decided it would be fun to learn the traditions and the things that matter to the other person. And so we've been on a journey for nearly 2 years now, really loving Jesus and loving each other and learning about how to love each other better. Now, in the process, of course, we come from different traditions, but we have some core values that really are what drew us together, because despite the differences that we may have, the things that we felt like were most important we really had in common. And so our core values you can check out on our website. If you go to everettgathering.com, you can learn a little bit more about our story. You can check out those core values that drew us together. And I think you'll find this is sort of a unique, interesting blend of two different communities that have really learned to not just appreciate one another's traditions, but really love one another. And so we invite you to be a part of it and learn a little bit more if you're interested in doing that. Now, a way that we usually introduce ourselves is with two words. We like to use the words cautious and curious. They're two words that we think kind of encapsulates quite a bit about who we are as a group. Now, we use the word cautious because many of us are a little cautious about organized religion. Some would even go so far as to say skeptical. Now, many of us grew up in religious environments, but we've definitely seen religion used in some ways that's beneficial and helpful and inspiring and beautiful. But we've also seen religion used in some ways that isn't quite so beautiful. We've seen religion used in ways that's harmful, toxic, used to exclude people. And some of us personally, or people that we know and love and care about, have been hurt by organized religion. So as a group, we sort of find ourselves a little cautious about organized religion. We're intrigued by Jesus, but we know that sometimes when people organize around religion, it can go off the rails very quickly. Now, I know what you're saying. It's kind of weird because this is a church, two churches actually, and we're sort of skeptical of organized religion. But we actually think that's sort of a good thing. We think that the tension there of being an organized group of religious people while also a little cautious about organized religion is something that helps us stay healthy. Now, the other word that we use to describe ourselves is the word curious. And by that, we mean we like to ask a lot of questions. But the reason we mention that here is simply because it kind of shows you our default posture on things. Namely that we don't think we have all the answers to everything. There's plenty of things that are a mystery to us, things that we're still in process working on, things that, frankly, we need other people to come into our life and share with us some of their life experiences, some of the things that they know. And so we're a group that is curious enough to ask each other a lot of questions and be willing to learn from one another. So you'll notice that oftentimes in our gatherings, we'll ask questions about things that we thought we actually already had answers to, ways of believing or thinking that have been handed down to us. We spend a lot of time asking questions about those things because often that is where our blind spots are hidden. So we'll ask questions and we'll rethink things, and sometimes we end up right where we started. And other times we discover, maybe there are some other ways of thinking or believing that are still faithful to Jesus, but make a little bit more sense for us or the people around us. Okay, so that's a little bit in a nutshell who we are. So if either of those two words, curious or cautious, kind of resonates with you, then this might be a really good group for you to continue to check out. Now, what we're going to be doing here is a little different than what we do in our in-person gatherings. In our in-person gatherings, we're kind of blending some of the formal and the informal a little bit more. We sing more songs. Here in the online space, we just sing one song. And so Billy, our worship leader, is going to come on the screen. He'll sing a song, and you can follow along with that if you would like to. You can sing along, or you can just, pray or tune it out, whatever you want to do. And then after that, there's going to be a little reflective video, and that video Today is a reading of Psalm 25. It is the lectionary reading for today, one of the lectionary readings. It's a great psalm of guidance and deliverance, and so you'll hear that psalm read on video, and then after that, we are going to continue in our new series that we are calling Esther, the Esther Scroll, the most secular book of the Bible, and we've been digging into this story, and today we get to maybe the most famous part of the story, the one line that kind of everybody knows is in here today. And so we'll get to that text here as well. And then afterwards, we're going to wrap the whole thing up with communion. And so we'll invite you to take communion if you would like to do that. Now, in our in-person gatherings, we take communion together each week. And when we do that, we supply all the things you need for that. You need the bread and you need the cup. And we provide that for you in person. But here in the online space, if you'd like to participate, we're going to carve out a moment, but you'll need to round up a couple items if you want to join in. So what you'll need is something for the bread, which could be a little piece of bread. It could be a little cracker. That would be fine. And then you'll need something for the cup. And that could be a little bit of juice. Or maybe you have some wine left over from last night's dinner. Just break out a little bit of that. And then you'll be invited to take communion with us here virtually if you would like to do that. Okay, and then we'll wrap up the whole thing with some announcements. So that's pretty much where we're going. Let's just get right to the music. Billy's going to lead us in a song. And then you'll hear that Psalm 25 reading. And I'll come on the screen after that. And we'll get going here with Esther. All right, Billy, take it away.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. When I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the sea. Could I ever need reminding of how I've been set free? There is a cross that bears the burden, where another died for me. There is another in the fire. All my debt left for dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. Should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning? Either way, I won't bow to the things of this world. 'Cause I know, and I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire, sitting next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding what power set me free? There is a grave that holds nobody. Now that power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, 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 and I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can feel the roar in the heavens can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing sits between us. Nothing sits between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and who is and will be through it all. So come away in the space between all the things I've seen and this reckoning. I know I'll never be alone. I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me? I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. And I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wasted. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing sits between us. Nothing sits between. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters holding back the sea. Should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me? I count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
All right, that's Psalm 25, beautiful psalm there. And I remember first reading that psalm really and having it just have a meaningful impact on my life when I was in college, took a class on the Psalms, and it was such a meaningful psalm to me then. And it is a psalm that has been a great comfort to many people for generation after generation. I was thinking back to college this week. I was thinking back to my undergrad stuff. We went down into Edmonds at one point, and that's where I went to college. And so I was down there thinking about it, and I was thinking about one of my very favorite classes in college was an Intro to Theology class, and that was a fun class because you get to argue with people. That's what kind of theology is. You just it's your musings about God, and not everybody sees everything the same way, and so you end up having these discussions, or maybe you call them arguments. And I remember maybe my favorite of those classes was one time we had sort of a substitute professor who came in. I can't remember why our regular professor was gone, but he came in and was going to talk about determinism versus free will. And so we started talking, and he asked if anybody had any questions, and so I raised a hand and kind of pushed back on some of his ideas, and then he responded and pushed back on me, and then I pushed back on him. And this class was about an hour long, and I'd say about 45 minutes of it was just this professor and I going back and forth, arguing. He had one side of the argument, I had the other side. He was arguing that basically the world was sort of already predetermined by God, that sort of he made all the decisions about things, and then you just kind of went along with it. And I was making the argument that there was an openness to reality, and that there may be some parameters that got to set up, but that humans have the ability to make choices that actually affect their own reality and the reality of people around them. In other words, things weren't exactly scripted. And so we were going back and forth, and it was very funny in the class because you could see the rest of the students are just kind of, it's like they're watching a tennis match. They're back and forth, just watching who's responding. And I mean, we went back and forth like that for nearly the entire class, and I just thought it was the best class ever. I mean, maybe everybody else was bored, but I thought it was a lot of fun. Hard to believe, I know, that I would be someone arguing with professors, but I was, and so that class I still remember it. It still stands out to me. Now, it's a really interesting discussion, isn't it? Theoretical discussion, the idea of determinism versus free will. In fact, it's one of the biggest questions of life, whether or not we actually have any control over it. Do things happen according to some sort of divine, invisible to us sort of plan or blueprint, and we just kind of have to go along with it? Is everything just all fate? Or can we actually influence events by our choices? Is everything scripted, or do some things happen only because we make certain choices? Or do some things even just happen by chance? Now, how we answer those questions, beyond just being a fun theoretical musing, it actually matters, especially in the real world when it comes to dealing with oppression and injustice. Because during those moments, we want to know, what do we do in the face of it? Do we just accept it because it's all scripted and outside of our control anyway? Or do we do something about it, believing that maybe our actions could change it? And how could we ever really know? Now, those are all very good questions, and they are the big questions that the characters in our story are going to wrestle with this week. Now, we're doing a series here called the Esther Scroll, and it is about a 2,500-year-old story that has been placed in our Bible, and it's intriguing because it actually never mentions God's name, and no one ever references God in the entire story, but somehow it ended up in our Bible. Now, it's an interesting story because it deals with a lot of issues, but today we're going to see it really deals with questions of faith. It's a story of a foreign people, these Jewish people living in a powerful empire, the Persian Empire, and facing now extermination. And last week we finally met our villain, Haman, or Haman, and you remember he came on the scene, and traditionally at Purim festivals, the Jewish people, whenever Haman's name is mentioned, they will boo him, and so in our in-person gatherings, as someone was reading the scroll story, everyone was booing during whenever Haman's name got mentioned. And so we met him last week, and what we learned about him is that he had been elevated to a high position by King Xerxes. And we have another character that we'd met previously. His name is Mordecai. And we discovered that Mordecai refused to bow down and show respect or honor that was due to Haman because of this elevated position that the king had put him in. And so Haman takes that personally. He's not very happy that this guy won't show him the respect that he is supposed to have. And so he decides he wants to kill not only Mordecai, but all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, as well. And so he comes to the king and he bribes the king to give an order to make it legal to kill any Jew on a specific day of Haman's choosing. Now, it's interesting that he doesn't say that all the Jews have to be killed, just that it's legal to kill any of them if you want to, which is sort of just semantics. Either way, it means a disaster for the Jewish people. So what are they going to do? And that leads us to chapter 4 today. Chapter 4 today, I'm calling it a dialogue of response because this entire chapter is like a back and forth tennis match, a back and forth dialogue between Mordecai and the other character from the title here of the story, Esther, as they go back and forth in a dialogue of response to one another. And what we're going to see in this chapter is they're both kind of trending towards responding to the circumstances, which are the same, with different strategies and different perspectives. And it's not that one is right or wrong, but we are going to notice in this chapter a tension back and forth as they have a dialogue about how to respond to what is happening. But the first thing we're going to see is how Mordecai himself responds to the news that Haman is not just out to kill him, but all the Jewish people. So let's start this. Esther 4, verse 1. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went throughout the city, wailing with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province, wherever the king's command and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and most of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. All right, here we're going to see right from the beginning of chapter 4, Mordecai's response to this injustice that says that his people will be killed. And his primary response to this injustice is protest. Now, Mordecai's response to all of this, once he discovers what is going to happen, is to protest what is said to happen through fasting and lament. Now, this isn't exactly unusual, okay? It's not even unique to Jewish people. Lots of ancient cultures practiced something similar in times of distress. They would take off their regular clothes, their nice clothes, and they'd sit in sackcloths and ashes, okay, torn rags, get themselves all dirty. They're trying to show that they are in distress. They're feeling an anguish on the inside, so they're trying to show it on the outside so that you know what's going on. This often is accompanied with prayer, but in this case, it's never mentioned that Mordecai is praying. And it's not unique to the Jews. We found even in the book of Jonah that the Ninevites actually end up sitting in sackcloth and ashes and lamenting when they hear some bad news. Now, normally, like I said, this would go along with some prayers to God for help. Fasting generally goes along with praying, but not in this story. What's interesting about this story is we have the comment that there is some lament, some fasting, sitting in sackcloth and ashes, wailing, but there's no mention of prayer. There's no mention of God. And it appears that Mordecai here, and then later the rest of the people, are doing this action not to influence God so much, but as a way of calling attention to an injustice. What they're doing is what all protest does. It makes a scene. They're getting all dirty, they're dressing up in sackcloth and ashes, and they're wailing in public. And that would be sort of hard to miss, walking down the street, and people are just wailing on the street. You'd be like, what's going on? And the whole idea here is to bring attention, to bring awareness to a situation that you're hoping to gain some sympathy from people. Like, what is wrong with these people? And then you figure out what it is, and perhaps then you will be moved to act. It's a way of dealing with injustice. I mean, protest. We still do it today, right? I mean, you've seen tons of protests even this summer in our own country. The whole idea here is make a scene. And there's a long tradition of this in history, all the way into even this story here in Esther. You see, lament and wailing, like protest, is meant to be loud and public. It's a form of civil protest. It's supposed to be dramatic. You're dressed in rags and crying to show the contrast with your normal life. And while Xerxes and Haman are in the private quarters of the king drinking, the people dressed in sackcloth and ashes are saying, we're out here suffering. Now, it's a way to bring attention to something, and in this case, it appears at least one of the people that Mordecai wants to gain the attention of is Esther herself, which certainly happens here in verse 4. When Esther's maids and her eunuch came and told her, presumably about what Mordecai was doing and all the people, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Now, we get the phrase here in verse 4 that Esther is deeply distressed or in deep distress. And it really means, the Hebrew word there means to writhe in anguish. It's a Hebrew word that only occurs in this form in the entire Bible right here, only once, right here in Esther. And it is an intense word, sometimes connected to childbirth. And the idea here is that she has intense distress. Although about what, we are sort of left wondering, aren't we? What is it that she's distressed about? Is she distressed about the planned genocide? Does she know about that at this point? Or does she only know that Mordecai is out there wailing and making a nuisance of himself? Is she distressed about Mordecai's behavior or the planned genocide? I mean, we know she knows that Mordecai is protesting. We just don't know if she knows why yet. And we wonder if maybe she's more worried about Mordecai's behavior because her response here is not to lament herself, but notice in verse 4 there, her response is to send clothes to Mordecai. In other words, clean up, man. Put some clothes on. Stop making a fool of yourself. It seems like her solution is to send Mordecai proper clothes, which is strange unless she's trying to tell him to stop making a scene. Which, if I was to guess then, I would say that Esther's response to Mordecai then is just really a word of caution. Can you clean yourself up a bit here? You're on the wrong track. Now, I'm reading into her motives a little bit, but we're all doing that as we read the story. And it seems like she's really concerned more about Mordecai's protest than anything about this genocide. Now, perhaps she doesn't know about the genocide yet, or perhaps she just doesn't like this strategy. Maybe she thinks it calls too much attention to the Jewish people and might make others look less favorably on them because they're sort of a nuisance and in the way. And that is sort of an interesting balance, right? When you're trying to think through what are you going to do in the face of injustice. How do you call attention to problems without sort of alienating the people who you want to bring awareness to and need their help? And maybe she thinks that Mordecai's just exaggerating things. I mean, I don't know. But it's clear she wants to play things a little more cautious. It's a different reaction. Now we discover that Mordecai is not going along with that, right? He refuses the clothes. And so instead, Esther sends someone now to try to talk some sense into him. Verse 5, then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what was happening and why. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther, explain it to her, and charge her to go to the king, to make supplication to him, and to entreat him for her people. Now, Hathach is sent by Esther to talk to Mordecai and get the information about what is happening here. And it's an interesting scene because obviously, Esther's trying to play it cautious here, and she's trying to pacify Mordecai. But it's an interesting scene because Mordecai, he tells Hathach that, no, there's a big issue going on. And what's so strange about it is he even seems to know private details that we're wondering, how did he even know this? How did he know about the bribe? That's something that the story seems to indicate happened in private. How did he even know the exact amount? We don't know. But again, this is a fictional story, okay? So the author is just letting us in on some details. But then we see that Mordecai even sends her an edict so she can see for herself. Now, maybe she doesn't believe that this genocide is actually in the works, and maybe she needs proof. But it's interesting to notice the items that Mordecai and Esther are sending to each other, okay? They seem oppositional. Esther sends Mordecai clothes to improve his appearance, to put a good face on things, to clean him up. But Mordecai sends her back information and proof to change her mind and her conscience. So Esther wants to fix things on the surface, but Mordecai wants to dig down a little deeper and deal with the problem. He's saying, you can't cover up this one. And so Mordecai's response here is really that he wants Esther to do something more than protest. He doesn't want her to join him in protest. What Mordecai wants to do is provoke her to act. And so Mordecai's now reply, or his response to Esther through Hathach, is do something. Do something already. Now, protest is a pretty good strategy for some people, but Mordecai recognizes that Esther here is in a position to actually do more than protest. She could get the king's ear. She could go to the king and ask for help. And, that is an important part of dealing with justice. Protest is good. I think some protests are beautiful. I was a part of a protest even here this summer, and I think they are meaningful and powerful and helpful and beneficial. But at a certain point, you start to wonder, well, what can we actually do? And Mordecai says, you're in a spot you don't have to protest. You could do something. Now, taking action beyond protest, though, is a little risky. And Esther seems to recognize this. Verse 9, Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message for Mordecai, okay? So now we're communicating to each other through Hathach, all right? Through a medium who's going back and forth. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. And I myself have not been called to come in to the king for 30 days. What is Esther's response through Hathach back to Mordecai? Well, Mordecai said, do something. And she says, I can't. I can't do it because the king won't actually hear me. My position isn't as good as you think it is. You see, we learn that Esther's participation in resistance might be more risky than just sitting in sackcloth and ashes. Protests can be dangerous. That's true. All sorts of people get very hurt, even killed during protests. And so protests can be dangerous. But what Esther's recognizing here is that this is a new level of danger, all right? If she intrudes on the king without being summoned, well, according to the story here, she could be killed. And by the way, queens have had sort of a hard time staying alive around King Xerxes lately. And I know what you're thinking, well, but she just won this beauty contest and it said that Xerxes loved her more than all the others. Xerxes loves her. He would never kill her, right? Well, maybe not. As Esther is quick to point out, I haven't seen this guy in like a month. You see, it appears that the relationship that Esther has with the king is not as a beloved queen who rules jointly with him. No, she appears to be one who is summoned to his room, probably whenever he wants pleasure, but she does not have a regular relationship with him. She's a queen in title, but without much power. She's being used by the king as much as anyone. And so she's afraid for her own safety. She's got to be thinking, if I just keep my head down, maybe I can get through this. Which then sets up Mordecai's reply which might be the most famous part of this whole story. And his next reply is just one that, if you've just are vaguely familiar with Esther, you've probably heard this. It's the most famous line in the story. Verse 12, when they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther. Okay? Now here's my response. Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for such a time as this. Now Mordecai is going to make his last reply here, and his final response is rather pointed, isn't it? He sort of calls Esther out. He says, you won't be safe just because you're in the palace. Privilege will not keep you safe. And it's a stern warning. Mordecai wants her to know, don't think you're safe just because you're in the palace. And he wants her to know that when tyrants come for those who are on the margins, others often think, well, at least it's not me, I'll be safe. But tyrants don't usually stop with those on the margins. A danger to one is a danger to all. And just because you live in a palace as a queen does not make you safe. Just ask Vashti. And then Mordecai, though, he leaves her with this statement. Who knows? Maybe you are where you are to do this very thing. And that's maybe the most famous line in the story, isn't it? Who knows that for such a time as this, you may have come into your position. Now, it's sort of an interesting statement because you wonder, is life just all fate? Are there things that happen that you can't control? Has she just been put in this position? Well, Mordecai doesn't seem to think so. He's actually out there protesting, trying to change things with his own actions, and he's pressuring Esther to act because he's not sure that she will. He seems to think that things can change based on their actions, and he seems pretty clear with her that she needs to make the right action in order for them to be successful. His argument isn't that Esther has been definitively placed by God to act. I mean, God is never even mentioned in this story, remember? And he also just says, maybe, perhaps, maybe this is providence. Perhaps this is the hand of God. But if not, deliverance will come from somewhere else. I like his response because there's sort of a tension in it, right? It's the tension of the conversation back and forth. There's a tension in even how do we respond to evil and injustice in our world. There feels like that part of the tension is our responsibility to act when we can, but also to have enough humility to recognize that it doesn't all depend on us. Perhaps someone else will play a key role. And there's a tension in, am I in this position to do something, or do I also have a genuine choice about what to do? Now, speaking into this tension, apparently Esther is convinced because the next verses reveal her reply. Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast in my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. And after that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. And so Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. And this is the end of the chapter, and it reveals Esther's final reply. And it is a very decisive response where Esther makes the decision, I will lead. Esther here chooses to act. But notice, she doesn't just reflectively do whatever Mordecai commands. She's been pushing back against his ideas. And now she is going to go along, at least in part, with one of them. But notice she begins issuing her own commands. She commands Mordecai, first singularly, him personally, and then the whole Jewish community using plural verb, in order to go do things, to go and fast. She is the one issuing orders now. And the whole thing, this whole story now, spins on her choices. She will not just do what Mordecai tells her. The final verse says that he will do what she has ordered him to do. She has decided to lead. And she tells Mordecai to organize another protest while she herself will go to the king illegally. It's a risk. She's going to put her life on the line. She is going to lead, but her leadership is going to be through personal sacrifice. She says, if I die, I die. And that is the statement of a leader, isn't it? It's a brave statement. Now, maybe it took her a while to get to this point, but she exhibits a lot of bravery here, a leadership quality I think we could all applaud. She is now not going to make her own safety the priority. She is going to put herself at risk for the benefit of others. Now you say, well, maybe she's just resigned to her situation, if I die, I die. I mean, maybe she's just kind of thinking, I'm dying either way here. If I stay silent, Haman will end up killing me. If I speak up, Xerxes is probably going to kill me. So she's probably just thinking, this is a lose-lose situation, right? So I guess I'll just do something. And maybe it's that. But some of the greatest bravery is born in desperation. And ultimately, she chooses, I will lead. And I will lead through self-sacrifice. That is the boldest form of leadership. Leadership that isn't about you as the leader, but is done for the benefit of others. And it's such a great response to injustice that I am going to place myself in harm's way for the benefit of others. I mean, because here she is thinking, I'm going to die either way, so I'm going to put myself in the way of harm in order to help others. It is such a great way to lead. And I would say that if the church today wants to exhibit leadership, if the church today wants to show leadership in our world, man, I think this is how to do it. If we want to really be leaders as those in the church, we need to put ourselves in the way of danger on behalf of others. We need to be willing to lead through self-sacrifice. We need to be willing to put our own privilege, our own comfort on the line and protect those who need help. Perhaps it's immigrants. Perhaps it's those who've been persecuted for their sexual preference. Perhaps it is those who are vulnerable, the poor. Leadership means leveraging all that we have for their benefit. It means refusing to sit out the fight. We're going to lead through self-sacrifice. Will it work out? Well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll read the rest of the story. But at this point, Esther has no idea. In fact, it kind of appears that she thinks it's not really going to work out, at least not for her. But she's going to risk it. And that seems so Jesus-y, doesn't it? God's never mentioned in this story. But it feels like if you were looking for Jesus in the text, you might find him right here at the end of chapter 4. Because how does Jesus respond to injustice? Well, Jesus responds with the bravery of self-sacrifice, in laying down his own privilege and his own comforts on behalf of those in need. It's what we celebrate at the cross. It's what we celebrate at communion. That Jesus, the firstborn from the dead, leading the way into a new way of life, has shown us as a leader the way to live, and it is through the pattern of the cross. And we are called to take up our cross and follow him. He is the model of leadership through self-sacrifice. We want to celebrate that today. We're going to go to the communion table, and the little video is going to play here. And as it plays, you can take communion if you've got those elements on hand. You can pause it if you need a little bit more time to reflect and spend a moment remembering the great demonstration of leadership and love that Jesus has shown for us at the cross. Let me pray for us, and we'll go to communion. God, thank you so much for today. Thank you that you are a God who has demonstrated for us what it means to live with the ultimate power in this universe, which is love. And love is a way of caring for others above and beyond ourselves. And Jesus, we admit today that many of us are privileged. There's many things in life that many of us have that have led us to comfort and relative ease of life. And we pray that you would inspire us to move from our position to leverage all that we have for those who do not have the security and the comforts that we have. May we take our pattern from you, Jesus, in living in the way of the cross. We're grateful for what you have done for us, and we believe that we don't join you in this adventure on our own, that your Spirit lives within us and animates us to follow you more closely than we could on our own. And so we pray for your help, Jesus, as we experience your presence around the communion table. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen. Okay, let's go to communion, and I'll see you afterwards for a couple announcements as we wrap up. All right, let's wrap up with a couple announcements here today. First of all, I just want to say it was so fun last week. We did a collaborative service with 3 other churches in the Everett area, 3 other Lutheran churches. Super fun. It was a little bit more of a formal liturgical service than what we normally do, but it was a nice blend of different traditions and just a really fun time. We had a barbecue afterwards. It was great. We did record it, and so it is available on YouTube as well if you want to go back and watch last week's kind of collaboration. We had different people from different churches leading music and readings and all sorts of stuff. It was fantastic. So if you want to go back and check that out, you can do that on YouTube. If you want to join us in person, you're always welcome to do that. We meet Sundays at 10 a.m. at the Zion Lutheran Church property, which is just south of downtown Everett. It's an easy on-off the freeway on the 41st Street exit, and we'd love to have you join us anytime in person with us. If you want to stay up to date with things that are happening, a nice way to do that is on the socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. You can find us at The Gathering Everett. and we post all sorts of stuff on there to keep you up to date with events that are happening. Another way to stay up to date with things is through our email newsletter. We send that out pretty regularly with announcements and stuff, and if you haven't been receiving that or on our distribution list, you can just message us on Facebook with your name and email address, or email me. My email is on the screen there, and you can drop me a line and say, add me to the distribution list, and we would be happy to do that. We have a kids' play date coming up this Wednesday. Some parents who have little ones who, obviously it's summertime, and so no one's in school, but you might have little ones that just never get out of the house, really, because they are too young to go to school. And so those families have been getting together once a week on Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. We've been meeting over the wintry times in the church building, but this week they're meeting at Forest Park in Everett. And so you can show up there at the playground at 9:30 a.m. and join a couple other kids if you want to play around a little bit. Could be a fun time. If you're a little bit older, we have our seniors group that's happening this Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. They meet downstairs at the church building. There's kind of a shared potluck time and snack potluck, I guess I'd say, and a time of discussion together. And so if you are retired or just otherwise consider yourself a senior, that is maybe a good group to check out as well. Finally, if you would like to give, you can donate online. That's the easiest way to do it at everettgathering.com/donate. You can set up a one-time gift or a recurring gift, and we appreciate those of you who are donating, and we thank you so much for that. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. Next week, the drama will build what is happening with Esther and Haman and Mordecai and the king. And so we'll get into that next week. I know it's going to be a scorcher this week, so I hope you stay cool and enjoy the summer, and we will catch up with you next time. Okay, God bless you. Bye.